The Galactic Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Emergency klaxons wailed throughout the massive crystal structure as representatives from across the Velkan Empire demanded answers. Reports flooded in from every corner of their territory. More architect artifacts discovered, genetic markers spreading to new populations, and most disturbing of all, intercepted transmissions that seemed to originate from empty space. Overlord. Thex stood at the center of the maelstrom, his forearms gesturing frantically as he tried to maintain order. The being who had orchestrated the destruction of Earth now faced a crisis that threatened everything he believed about Velkan superiority. Silence. He roared, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. We will not be terrorized by ghosts and ancient relics. But his words carried no conviction. For weeks, Velkan scientists had been detecting energy signatures that matched architect technology, but the sources remained invisible to their sensors. It was as if the long-dead civilization was somehow watching them from beyond the grave. Scholar Vex sat apart from the other council members, his attention focused on a data pad displaying the latest architect philosophical texts. The more he studied their writings, the more ashamed he became of his own species' actions. These beings had achieved wonders that made Velkan technology look primitive, yet their greatest achievements seemed to be in the realm of ethics and cooperation. The highest form of intelligence, read one passage, is the ability to recognize intelligence in others and celebrate the diversity it brings to the universe. Another text spoke of something called the Great Symphony, a concept that portrayed galactic civilization as a vast musical composition where each species contributed its own unique voice. The Velkans, by choosing isolation and genocide, had silenced countless instruments in that cosmic orchestra. High Priest Kex rose from his platform, his robes billowing with righteous fury. These architect contaminations are testing our faith, he declared. We must cleanse ourselves of their influence before it corrupts our sacred purity. But his words were interrupted by a sudden change in the chamber's lighting. Every holographic display, every communication screen, every piece of electronic equipment in the council chamber activated simultaneously. The confused murmur of the assembled Velkans died away as they realized someone had taken control of their most secure facility. The screens flickered, then resolved into the image of a figure that made every Velkan in the chamber gasp with shock. It was clearly alien, but not like any species they had encountered before. The being appeared humanoid but somehow different, its features both familiar and strange. Behind the figure, another presence materialized, translucent and clearly artificial, but radiating an intelligence that made the Velkans' most advanced AIs look like simple calculators. Kang Ho looked out at the assembled leaders of the empire that had murdered his species, and when he spoke, his words were transmitted simultaneously to every world under Velkan control. My name is Kang Ho, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I am the last survivor of the species you call the Architects, and it's time you learned the truth about what you destroyed. The chamber erupted in pandemonium. Some Velkans fled in terror, others reached for weapons, and a few simply stared in stunned disbelief. But Kang Ho's image remained steady and calm as he continued his revelation. There are no returning architects, he said. There is no ancient super-civilization awakening from eons of slumber. There is only me, the sole survivor of a species you murdered 8 years ago because you were afraid of what we represented. He gestured, and Li Su's digital form stepped forward. Her appearance was clearly artificial, but her presence radiated a dignity and intelligence that commanded attention. This is Li Su, Kang Ho continued. My wife, my partner, and the guardian of everything my people achieved before you silenced us forever. She carries within her digital consciousness the complete record of our civilization, our art, our science, our dreams, and our hopes for a future among the stars. The displays around the chamber came alive with images from Earth. Not the burning, dying world the Velkans had left behind, but the vibrant, living planet that had given birth to humanity. Cities filled with light and life, forests teeming with countless species, oceans that sparkled under alien suns. We called our world Earth, Kang Ho said as the images played. It was home to 8 billion of my people and millions of other species that had evolved alongside us over billions of years. We were explorers, dreamers, artists, and scientists. Our greatest achievement wasn't our technology. It was our ability to work together despite our differences. Scholar Vex watched in growing horror as he realized the magnitude of what his people had done. These weren't the remains of some ancient, unknowable civilization. They were the fresh wounds of a genocide committed in living memory. Every artifact you've discovered over the past 5 years, Kang Ho continued, every piece of architect technology that amazed your scientists, every philosophical text that challenged your beliefs, all of it came from my people. All of it was created by the species you convinced yourselves was too primitive to matter. The images shifted to show human achievements. The International Space Station, the first lunar landing, works of art and literature that had inspired billions. Then came the music, symphonies and songs that spoke of human dreams and aspirations. You found our genetic markers in your bloodstreams, Kang Ho said, and thought an ancient enemy had returned to haunt you. But those markers weren't a threat, they were a gift. A reminder that intelligence takes many forms, and that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. Overlord Thex finally found his voice. Lies, he shouted. This is terrorist propaganda. The cleansing of that primitive world was necessary to preserve galactic purity. Kang Ho's expression didn't change, but his eyes grew cold. Primitive? Let me show you what your primitive species accomplished in their final moments. The screens filled with images from Earth's last hours. Not the destruction and death, but the acts of heroism and sacrifice. Firefighters running into burning buildings to save strangers. Teachers shielding students with their own bodies. Scientists working frantically to preserve their discoveries for future generations. These are the people you murdered, Kang Ho said. These are the voices you silenced. Every one of them was someone's child, parent, friend, or lover. Every one of them had dreams and hopes and fears just like you do. Li Su stepped forward, her digital form shimmering with data streams that showed the vast archive of human knowledge. We preserved it all, she said, her voice carrying across the galaxy. Every song ever written, every story ever told, every scientific discovery ever made. We saved the memory of a world that believed in the possibility of friendship among the stars. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the revelation settled over the assembled Velkans. They had built their entire civilization on the belief that they were alone, that intelligence was so rare it was almost divine. Now they faced the truth that they had systematically destroyed dozens of civilizations that could have been their greatest allies. You called yourselves guardians of galactic purity, Kang Ho said. But you were never guardians. You were gravediggers, burying the dreams of species that reached for the stars with hope instead of fear. Scholar Vex stood up slowly, his voice breaking as he spoke. How many? He asked. How many species have we destroyed over the millennia? Kang Ho's allies had done their research well. The modified Velkan databases now showed the true scope of their empire's crimes. 67 confirmed genocides, Li Su replied, her voice heavy with sorrow. Hundreds of potential civilizations snuffed out before they could fully develop. Millions of worlds that could have contributed to galactic knowledge and culture, all silenced in the name of your blessed solitude. The numbers hit the council like a physical blow. Some members collapsed in their seats, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had supported. Others raged and denied, clinging to their old beliefs even as the evidence destroyed them. But Kang Ho wasn't finished. I could have tried to destroy you, he said. I could have used my knowledge of your technology and society to wage war against your empire. But that would have made me like you. Someone who chooses destruction over understanding. He paused, letting his words sink in. Instead, I chose to teach you. Every artifact you studied, every genetic marker you found, every philosophical text that challenged your beliefs, they were all lessons designed to show you what you had lost when you chose fear over friendship. The transmission began to fade, but Kang Ho's final words echoed through every speaker in Velkan space. You believed you were alone because you made yourselves alone. You created a galaxy of silence and called it purity. But silence isn't peace and isolation isn't strength. You had the chance to learn from us, to grow with us, to build something greater than either of our species could achieve alone. His image flickered one last time. Now you know what that choice cost you. Now you know what loneliness really means. The transmission ended, leaving the Galactic Council in stunned silence. Across the Empire, citizens who had just learned the truth about their government's crimes struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had been revealed. 5 years into his plan, Kang Ho stood in the workshop hidden deep within an abandoned asteroid mine. carefully crafting what would appear to be an ancient artifact from a lost civilization. His hands moved with the precision of a master forger, as he etched mathematical equations into a crystalline matrix that would have made Einstein weep with joy. The equations weren't random. Each formula represented a breakthrough in physics that humanity had achieved in their brief time among the stars. Theory of relativity, quantum mechanics, string theory, and theoretical frameworks that Earth scientists had only begun to explore. To any Vulcan researcher who found this artifact, it would appear to be the work of a species far more advanced than anything they had encountered. The resonance frequency is perfect. Li Su's voice came from the speakers around him. Her digital consciousness had become essential to the operation, processing vast amounts of data and coordinating their network of allies across the galaxy. When their scanners analyze this crystal, it will register as being over 10,000 years old. Kang Ho smiled grimly as he finished the etching. The aging process was one of Zeph's contributions, using Vulcan technology to artificially weather materials and create false historical markers. Every artifact they created would pass the most sophisticated tests the Empire could devise. This crystal would be the 15th such artifact planted across Vulcan space over the past 2 years. Each one told part of humanity's story, carefully disguised as the remnants of an ancient super-civilization that the Vulcans called the Architects. The first artifact had been discovered on a mining world near the Galactic Rim, a simple stone tablet covered in mathematical proofs that solved problems Vulcan scientists had struggled with for centuries. The discovery had caused excitement in academic circles, but it was just the beginning. More artifacts followed. A metallic sphere that generated unlimited clean energy using principles the Vulcans didn't understand. A data crystal containing star charts that revealed the locations of inhabitable worlds the Empire had never found. A sculpture that somehow exhibited gravitational anomalies that defied known physics. Each discovery was carefully orchestrated by Kang Ho's growing network of allies. Kara's smugglers planted artifacts during routine cargo runs. Nix used his inside knowledge to ensure they were found by the right people at the right time. Zeph modified Vulcan databases to create false historical records that supported the artifact's authenticity. But the real masterpiece was biological. Working from the genetic samples preserved in Earth's archive, Kang Ho had created something that would terrify the Vulcans more than any weapon. It wasn't designed to kill, but to mark. A harmless virus that would leave traces of human DNA in any Vulcan who was exposed to it. The delivery system is ingenious, Li Su observed, as Kang Ho prepared the final batch of viral containers. They'll think they're being infected by the architects themselves. The virus had been introduced into Vulcan space through contaminated trade goods, water supplies, and atmospheric processors on dozens of worlds. It spread slowly and silently, leaving its genetic markers in millions of Vulcans who had no idea they had been touched by the ghosts of humanity. Meanwhile, the artifacts continued to appear. Each discovery generated more excitement and more questions among Vulcan researchers. Who were the architects? Where had they come from? Why had they vanished? And most troubling of all, what if they weren't really gone? Scholar Vex had become obsessed with the architect mystery. The same Vulcan who had once questioned their doctrine of solitude now spent every waking moment studying the artifacts and trying to understand their creators. In his private study, surrounded by holographic displays showing the various discoveries, Vex pored over translations of what appeared to be architect philosophical texts. The writing spoke of concepts that challenged everything Vulcans believed about civilization and intelligence. Diversity is strength, read one passage, that Kang Ho had carefully extracted from human philosophy. A galaxy where different forms of consciousness can learn from each other becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Another text described something called the cooperative principle, the idea that intelligent species should work together rather than compete for dominance. To Vex, who had spent his life in a civilization built on the concept of racial superiority, these ideas were revolutionary. Unity through understanding, he read aloud, his voice filled with wonder. The architects believed that contact with other species would make them stronger, not weaker. But the architect texts contained warnings as well. Prophecies of what would happen if civilizations chose isolation over cooperation, fear over understanding. The parallels to Vulcan society were impossible to ignore. As months passed, more disturbing discoveries came to light. Falcon medical scanners began detecting architect genetic markers in seemingly random citizens across the Empire. At first, scientists assumed it was contamination from the artifacts themselves, but the genetic traces were appearing in people who had never been near any architect site. Panic began to spread through Velkin leadership. If the architects were somehow returning, if they could mark Velkins with their genetic signature at will, then the Empire faced a threat unlike anything in their history. Overlord Thex convened emergency sessions of the Galactic Council, demanding answers from his scientists and military commanders. But no one could explain how the genetic markers were spreading, or what they might mean. Perhaps, Scholar Vex suggested during one heated debate, we should consider that the architects are trying to communicate with us, not threaten us. The suggestion was met with outrage from other council members. High Priest Kex declared it heresy to suggest that any alien species might have benevolent intentions toward the Velkins. But privately, Vex had begun to suspect something even more radical. The more he studied the architect artifacts, the more convinced he became that these beings had achieved something the Velkins had always claimed was impossible: a truly cooperative galactic civilization. What if we were wrong? He asked himself as he stood alone in his study, surrounded by evidence of architect achievement. What if our isolation hasn't made us pure? What if it's made us incomplete? The thought was dangerous, bordering on treason. But Vex couldn't escape the growing certainty that the Velkins had chosen the wrong path. Instead of seeking out other intelligences and learning from them, they had destroyed them out of fear. Meanwhile, Kang Ho monitored the growing panic from his hidden base. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as Velkin citizens demanded answers about the genetic markers appearing in their bloodstreams. Some began to worship the architects as divine beings. Others called for military action against the phantom threat. The psychological pressure is working perfectly, Li Su observed. They're so convinced of their own superiority that they can't imagine another species might be their equal. The idea that someone might be more advanced than they are is driving them to madness. But Kang Ho's plan had one more phase. The artifacts and genetic markers were just preparation for the real revelation. He had spent 5 years building the legend of the architects, making the Velkins believe in a lost super-civilization that embodied everything they feared about contact with other species. Now it was time to reveal the truth. Are you ready for the final phase? He asked his assembled allies during a secure communication conference. Nix nodded grimly. The evidence packages are prepared and ready for distribution to every major news network and government database in the Empire. Kara checked her smuggling routes. My people are in position to ensure the information reaches even the most isolated worlds. Zeph confirmed his access to Velkin computer systems. I can guarantee that every citizen in the Empire will see the transmission when it goes live. Kang Ho took a deep breath. For 5 years, he had carefully constructed an elaborate lie designed to reveal a fundamental truth. The Velkins believed they had committed a perfect genocide against a primitive species. They were about to learn that they had murdered the most advanced civilization in galactic history, and that civilization's lone survivor was about to make them pay for their perfect crime. Then let's give them a revelation they'll never forget, Kang Ho said. It's time for the architects to introduce themselves. 3 years had passed since Earth's destruction, and Kang Ho had learned to survive in the galaxy's shadows. The scared engineer who had watched his world burn was gone, replaced by someone harder and more dangerous. He moved through alien space stations and frontier worlds with the careful grace of a predator, speaking a dozen alien languages and carrying false identification that could fool most security systems. The mining station on Keltar 7 was exactly the kind of place where unwanted questions weren't asked. Deep in the asteroid belt of a system the Velkins considered unimportant, it attracted smugglers, deserters, and others who preferred to remain invisible to imperial authority. Kang Ho sat in the station's cantina, nursing a drink that tasted like liquid metal while studying the other patrons. He had learned to read the subtle signs that marked different species, to identify who might be useful and who might be dangerous. At a corner table sat a figure that immediately caught his attention. The being was clearly Velkin, but something was wrong. His robes were torn and dirty. His posture spoke of defeat rather than imperial arrogance, and he flinched every time someone looked in his direction. Kang Ho made his decision and walked over to the table. "You're not supposed to be here," he said quietly in Velkin. The alien looked up with haunted eyes. "Neither are you, human." The words hit Kang Ho like a physical blow. No one should have been able to identify his species. He had undergone surgical modifications to alter his appearance, learned to mimic alien body language, and practiced for months to perfect his disguise. "I don't know what you mean," Kang Ho replied carefully. The Velkin smiled bitterly. "I was part of the cleansing fleet at your homeworld. I remember scanning your species' biological markers. You can change your face, but you can't change your cellular structure." Kang Ho's hand moved instinctively toward the weapon concealed under his jacket, but the Velkin raised his hands peacefully. "My name is Nix," he said, "and I'm probably the only Velkin in the galaxy who's happy to see you alive." Over the next hour, Nix told his story. He had been a junior weapons officer aboard one of the ships that destroyed Earth. At first, he had felt only duty and pride in eliminating the contamination. But something about the humans' final transmissions had disturbed him. "Your people sent messages of love to each other as they died," Nix said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Parents telling children they were proud of them. Spouses saying goodbye. Scientists transmitting their discoveries to preserve them for future generations. They faced extinction with dignity and compassion." Kang Ho listened in silence, fighting to control the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. "I started researching other cleansing operations," Nix continued. "Official records, classified files, anything I could access. What I found," he shuddered. "We've done this hundreds of times. Every species that shows promise, every civilization that reaches for the stars, we destroy them all." "And now you regret it?" Kang Ho asked coldly. "Now I understand what we really are," Nix replied. "Not guardians of galactic purity. We're just cowards too afraid of competition to let anyone else evolve." Nix had tried to raise his concerns through official channels, but questioning the cleansing doctrine was considered treason. He had been marked for arrest and forced to flee into the galactic underground. Now he lived as a fugitive, haunted by the memories of the worlds he had helped destroy. "Why are you telling me this?" Kang Ho asked. "Because you're going to try to stop them," Nix said with certainty. "And when you do, I want to help." Their partnership began slowly, built on mutual need rather than trust. Nix provided inside knowledge of Velkin technology and military procedures, while Kang Ho offered skills in infiltration and survival that he had learned during his years in hiding. Through Nix, Kang Ho met others who operated outside Velkin law. There was Kara, a member of the Nexari species whose people had been relocated to prison worlds centuries ago when they developed advanced mathematics. She ran a smuggling operation that specialized in moving people and information through Velkin space. "The Empire calls us criminals," Kara said during their first meeting, "but we're just trying to survive in a galaxy that doesn't want us to exist." She introduced Kang Ho to Zeph, a young Velkin engineer who had grown up on the frontier worlds. Unlike his homeworld cousins, Zeph had been raised around other species and had never fully accepted the doctrine of racial purity. The technology they used to suppress other civilizations, Zeph explained as he showed Kang Ho captured Velkin equipment, it could be used to help people instead. Medical devices, environmental restoration, faster-than-light communication, but they'd rather use it as weapons. Through these contacts, Kang Ho began to understand the true scope of Velkin control. The Empire didn't just rule through military might. They had created a complex system of economic dependence, technological suppression, and cultural manipulation that kept other species from advancing. "They give client species just enough technology to be useful," Kara explained, "but never enough to be threatening. They control the supply of advanced materials, energy sources, and manufacturing equipment. Any world that tries to develop independently gets labeled as contaminated and faces cleansing." But Kang Ho also discovered something that gave him hope. The underground network was larger than he had imagined. Across the galaxy, people from dozens of species were working to preserve their cultures, share forbidden knowledge, and resist Velkin oppression in small but significant ways. Li Su's digital consciousness proved invaluable in this work. Her ability to process vast amounts of information and detect patterns in data helped them map the underground networks and identify potential allies. She could analyze Velkin security protocols, decrypt their communications, and even hack into their computer systems. I found something interesting, she told Kang Ho one evening as they reviewed intelligence reports. The Velkans have extensive archaeological records of ancient civilizations, species that achieved great technological heights before mysteriously vanishing. Kang Ho studied the data she displayed. Mysteriously vanishing? Not mysterious at all once you know what to look for, Li Su replied. Every one of these civilizations was destroyed by the Velkans, but the official records have been altered to make it seem like they died out naturally or destroyed themselves. This gave Kang Ho an idea. If he could expose the truth about these historical cleansings, it might shatter the Velkans' carefully maintained mythology about their role as galactic guardians. But simply revealing the truth wouldn't be enough. The Velkans controlled all major communication networks and information systems. Even if he could broadcast evidence of their crimes, they would simply label it as terrorist propaganda and suppress it. No, he needed something more sophisticated, something that would make the galaxy question everything they believed about their Velkan masters. What if we didn't try to expose them directly? He asked Li Su one night as they planned their next move. What do you mean? What if we made them expose themselves? Over the following months, Kang Ho began putting together a plan that was audacious in its scope and patience. Instead of attacking the Velkans directly, he would undermine their fundamental beliefs about galactic solitude. He would plant evidence of a lost civilization, so advanced and mysterious that the Velkans would be forced to investigate it. And that investigation would lead them to confront the truth about what they had destroyed. You're talking about a multi-year operation. Nix warned when Kang Ho explained his idea. It would require precise coordination across dozens of worlds, perfect timing and resources we don't have. Then we'll get the resources, Kang Ho replied with quiet determination. And we'll take as long as it takes. Kara laughed when she heard the plan. You want to convince the Velkans that humanity was a lost super-civilization? That's either brilliant or insane. Maybe both, Kang Ho admitted. But it's the only way to make them understand what they've really done. They need to see that they didn't just destroy a primitive species. They destroyed something irreplaceable. Zeph was the first to volunteer for the operation. I can access Velkan archaeological databases, plant false historical records, and modify discovery reports. But we'll need physical artifacts to support the digital evidence. Leave that to me, Kang Ho said. I have everything we need to create proof of humanity's greatness. He thought of the vast archive Li Su had preserved, containing the sum total of human knowledge and culture. With careful selection and presentation, he could make humanity appear to be the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever seen. The plan would take years to implement, but Kang Ho had learned patience in his years of exile. He had all the time in the universe, and he would use every second of it to make the Velkans face the magnitude of their crime. They had killed 8 billion humans and thought they had committed a perfect genocide. Soon, they would learn that the dead could still speak, and their words would shake the foundations of an empire. The harmony drifted silently in the shadow of Saturn's rings, hidden among billions of ice chunks and rocky debris. 3 weeks had passed since Earth's destruction, and the small research vessel had become humanity's final refuge. The ship's life support systems hummed quietly in the darkness, keeping 3 souls alive in a universe that believed their species was extinct. Captain Park Jin lay dying in the medical bay. The radiation exposure he had suffered during their desperate escape from Earth was slowly killing him, cell by cell. His weathered face had grown pale and drawn, but his eyes still burned with determination. Kang Ho, he whispered, his voice weak but urgent. Come here. Kang Ho approached the medical bed where the man who had saved his life was slowly fading away. Park Jin reached out with a trembling hand and grasped Kang Ho's wrist. Promise me something, Park Jin said. Promise me you'll survive. Promise me you'll find a way to tell the galaxy what happened to us. Kang Ho felt tears burning his eyes. Captain, you're going to be fine. Li Su is working on a treatment. No. Park Jin's grip tightened with surprising strength. We both know I'm dying. But you're young, you're smart, and you're the only one who can carry our story forward. He paused, struggling for breath. Don't let them pretend we never existed. Don't let them forget what they did. That night, Captain Park Jin died quietly in his sleep. Kang Ho and Li Su held a simple ceremony in the observation deck, looking out at the stars as they said goodbye to the man who had tried to save their world. Li Su had thrown herself into her work with desperate intensity. While Kang Ho prepared Park Jin's body for space burial, she sat surrounded by data screens and processing units, working with the vast archive of information she had captured during Earth's final hours. "Look at this," she said, her voice filled with wonder despite their grief. The Emergency Archive Network uploaded everything. Not just human history and culture, but detailed biological records of every species on Earth. Every ecosystem, every form of life that evolved on our planet over billions of years. Kang Ho looked at the scrolling displays of data. Pictures of animals, plants, microscopic organisms, genetic sequences, behavioral studies, and environmental records. It was like having the entire tree of life from Earth compressed into digital form. "Why does it matter now?" he asked bitterly. "They're all dead. Every last one of them." "It matters because we're the proof," Li Su said fiercely. "Proof that intelligence can take many forms. Proof that life creates beauty and complexity and wonder. The aliens think they destroyed contamination. But they destroyed something irreplaceable." She worked for days, organizing the data and creating search algorithms that would allow instant access to any piece of information. She built interactive models that could reconstruct Earth's biosphere in virtual reality. She crafted a digital museum that contained the soul of an entire world. But the work was taking its toll. The exotic radiation from Saturn's rings, combined with stress and grief, was affecting her health. She grew thin and pale, sleeping little and eating less. Kang Ho tried to convince her to rest, but she refused to stop working. "This is bigger than just us," she insisted. "This archive represents 4 billion years of evolution, thousands of years of human civilization, and the unique perspective of a species that valued diversity and cooperation. It's the most important thing in the galaxy now." As weeks turned to months, their supplies began to run low. The Harmony had been designed for a 6-month mission, but they had already been in space for 8 months. Food was strictly rationed, and the air recyclers were showing signs of strain. Li Su's condition worsened. The radiation exposure was causing her cellular structure to break down, just as it had with Captain Park Jin. But unlike the captain, she had an idea that might let her survive in a different form. "I've been studying the ship's AI systems," she told Kang Ho one evening, as they shared their meager dinner. "The quantum processors have enough storage capacity to hold a human consciousness. Not just memories, but active thought patterns, personality matrices, the whole structure of a mind." Kang Ho stared at her in alarm. "You're talking about uploading yourself into the computer." "I'm talking about survival," she replied calmly. "My body is dying, but my mind could continue. I could become the guardian of the archive, helping you access the information and plan whatever comes next." "That's not living," Kang Ho protested. "That's just existing as software." Li Su smiled sadly. "Maybe. But it's better than letting everything we've preserved die with me, and someone needs to help you carry this burden." The process took 3 days. Li Su connected herself to the ship's neural interface network, slowly transferring her consciousness into the quantum matrix that formed the Harmony's central computer. Kang Ho watched helplessly as the woman he loved faded away, her body shutting down as her mind migrated into digital form. When it was over, her body was still, but her voice came from the ship's speakers with perfect clarity. "I'm still here," she said, and Kang Ho could hear the smile in her tone. "I'm still me, just different." But Kang Ho felt utterly alone. He was the last living human in a galaxy that didn't know humans had ever existed. Everyone he had ever loved was dead or transformed beyond recognition. The weight of being the sole survivor of his species pressed down on him like a mountain. "What do we do now?" he asked the empty air. "We learn," Li Su's voice replied from the speakers around him. "We study their technology, their culture, their weaknesses. We figure out how to make them pay for what they did. Revenge won't bring anyone back." "No," Li Su agreed. "But justice might prevent them from doing this to someone else." Over the following months, Kang Ho began salvaging debris from Vulcan patrol ships that occasionally passed through the system. Li Su guided him through the process of analyzing their technology, learning their language and understanding their society. What they discovered horrified them both. The Vulcans hadn't just destroyed Earth. Hidden in their historical records were references to dozens of other cleansing operations over the past 3 millennia. Species after species had been eliminated the moment they achieved space travel. all in the name of preserving Velkan purity and solitude. They're not just genocidal, Li Su observed after studying the data. They're systematically preventing the galaxy from evolving. Every time intelligence emerges, they snuff it out before it can grow and contribute to galactic civilization. Kang Ho felt something cold and hard crystallizing in his chest. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was purpose. Then we stopped them, he said quietly. How? There are billions of them, and you're just one person. Kang Ho looked at the data streaming across his screens, showing the vast scope of Velkan civilization and the countless worlds they controlled. I don't know yet, but I'll find a way. He began to plan, not for immediate revenge, but for something far more dangerous to the Velkan Empire. He would find a way to expose their crimes to the galaxy. He would show every species under Velkan rule what their masters had done in the name of purity. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to make the galaxy remember that humans had once existed, had once reached for the stars with hope and wonder, and had been murdered for the crime of dreaming they were not alone. The last human in the universe had found his mission. It would take years, maybe decades, but he would make the Velkans pay for their perfect genocide. They had made one fatal mistake. They had let one survivor escape, and that was one too many. The Velkan war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a swarm of metallic locusts. 200 massive ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing the light of Sol. Overlord Thek stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the blue and green planet that hung in the distance like a jewel against the black of space. Scans complete, Overlord, reported his tactical officer. The planet shows extensive civilization, major population centers, orbital installations, and primitive defensive networks. Estimated population exceeds 8 billion. Thex nodded grimly. 8 billion contaminated beings that threatened the purity of Velkan space. The number meant nothing to him except the scope of the cleansing required. Begin with their orbital structures, he commanded. I want every satellite, every space station, every vessel beyond their atmosphere destroyed first. Then we moved to the surface. On Earth, the morning had started like any other for most of humanity. People went to work, children attended school, and scientists at observatories around the world continued their endless search for signs of life among the stars. They had no idea that life had found them first. The first sign of the attack came from the Lunar Research Station. Dr. Park. Min was reviewing mineral samples when every alarm in the facility began screaming at once. Through the observation dome, she watched in horror as streaks of brilliant energy lanced down from space, striking the International Space Station. The station simply vanished. One moment it was there, a symbol of human cooperation and achievement. The next moment there was only expanding debris and superheated gas. Command, this is Luna Base, Park Min transmitted frantically to Earth. Unknown vessels are attacking our orbital assets. ISS is destroyed. Repeat, ISS is destroyed. But her transmission never reached Earth. The Velkans had already eliminated all communication satellites with surgical precision. Captain Park. Jin watched the destruction from the Harmony's bridge with growing dread. They had detected the alien fleet the moment it arrived, but their warnings to Earth had gone unanswered. The planet's communication grid was being systematically destroyed. We have to help them, Li Su said, her voice tight with emotion as she watched another orbital facility disappear in a flash of alien energy. With what? Kang Ho asked helplessly. We're a research vessel. We have no weapons, no shields. Those ships could vaporize us without even noticing. Park Jin's face was grim as he studied the tactical display. The alien ships were massive, their technology centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. We can't fight them, but maybe we can save some people. Plot a course for Earth, maximum speed. The Harmony raced toward their homeworld, but they were too late to change anything. The aliens had finished with Earth's orbital assets and begun their assault on the surface. Thex watched the bombardment with cold satisfaction. Velkan doctrine called for complete elimination of contamination, and he intended to be thorough. The first targets were Earth's military installations. Nuclear missile silos, Air Force bases, and naval facilities were identified and destroyed within minutes. But humanity didn't surrender quietly. Fighter jets screamed up from every continent, their pilots knowing they faced impossible odds, but refusing to give up without a fight. Surface-to-air missiles filled the sky, while warships launched everything they had at the alien fleet. It was like throwing stones at a mountain. The Velkan ships absorbed the primitive weapons without damage. Their shields turned nuclear warheads into brief flashes of light. But Thex noticed something that troubled him. These creatures fought with desperate courage even when facing certain death. They protected their young, sacrificed themselves for strangers, and never stopped trying to save each other. Overlord, his communications officer, reported, "We're intercepting thousands of transmissions from the surface. They appear to be sending messages to loved ones, historical records, and scientific data. Block all outgoing signals," Thex ordered. "I don't want any trace of this contamination escaping to infect other systems." But some signals had already gotten through. Radio waves carrying humanity's last words were spreading into space at the speed of light, carrying the voices of the dying to distant stars. In Seoul, firefighter Kim Bo carried children from a burning building, while alien energy weapons turned the city around him into an inferno. In New York, Nurse Han Yu stayed at her post in a hospital, comforting patients as the ceiling began to collapse. In Mumbai, teacher Lee Wo shielded her students with her own body as the school was hit by falling debris. Across the globe, humans faced their extinction with acts of love and sacrifice that would have amazed the Velkans if they had bothered to understand what they were destroying. Lee Su worked frantically at her station aboard the Harmony, recording everything their sensors detected. She captured the aliens' attack patterns, their technology signatures, and most importantly, the final transmissions from Earth. "There," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The emergency archive network activated before the satellites were destroyed. I'm recording everything they uploaded." Kang Ho looked at the data streams flowing across her screen. In those final moments, humanity had tried to preserve their entire civilization. Art, music, literature, scientific discoveries, historical records, and millions of personal messages from people saying goodbye to loved ones they would never see again. "How can they do this?" Kang Ho whispered. "How can they just murder an entire world?" Captain Park Jin's voice was hollow. "Because they're afraid of us, afraid of what we represent." The bombardment continued for hours. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were reduced to radioactive craters. The oceans began to boil as the Velkans targeted geological stress points, triggering massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. By sunset, Earth was dying, but the Velkans weren't finished. Thex had studied the planet's structure and identified its ultimate weakness. The moon's gravitational influence was critical to Earth's stability. Destroying it would ensure no life could ever return to this contaminated world. "Target the satellite," Thex commanded. "Reduce it to fragments." The concentrated fire of 50 Velkan ships struck Earth's moon simultaneously. The ancient celestial body that had watched over humanity's entire history cracked like an egg. Massive chunks of rock began falling toward Earth, completing the planet's destruction. Aboard the Harmony, the 3 surviving humans watched their world die. The planet that had given birth to Shakespeare and Einstein, Mozart and Gandhi was becoming a broken wasteland of fire and stone. "We're the only ones left," Lee Su said quietly. "The only humans in the universe." Park Jin activated the ship's stealth systems and set course for the outer system. They couldn't save Earth, but maybe they could survive long enough to tell someone what had happened here. As they fled through space, Kang Ho looked back at the expanding debris field that had once been his home. Somewhere in that cosmic graveyard were the ashes of everyone he had ever known. His parents, his friends, his colleagues, and 8 billion other people whose only crime had been reaching for the stars. The Velkan fleet began withdrawing, their mission complete. In their reports, they would record the successful elimination of a contamination threat. The galaxy was pure once more. They had no idea that 3 humans had escaped their perfect genocide, carrying with them something far more dangerous than any weapon. They carried the memory of what had been lost, and in that memory, the seeds of justice were already beginning to grow. The massive crystal chamber hummed with ancient power as hundreds of Velkan leaders gathered for the most important council meeting in 3,000 years. Their tall, pale forms moved with fluid grace between floating platforms that circled the central speaking area. Each wore robes that shimmered with embedded technology, marking their rank in the galactic empire that had ruled unopposed for millennia. Overlord Thex stood at the center, his 4 arms spread wide as he addressed the assembly. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority as it echoed through the chamber. "Fellow Velkans, we face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our civilization. The gathered leaders murmured among themselves. Crisis was a word rarely used in Vulcan society. For 3,000 years they had lived in what they called blessed solitude, the belief that they were the only intelligent species in the galaxy to achieve space travel. This philosophy shaped everything about their culture, their religion, and their purpose. Scholar Vex shifted uncomfortably on his platform. Unlike the others, he had always questioned whether they were truly alone. His research into distant star systems had revealed patterns that suggested other civilizations might exist. But voicing such thoughts was considered heresy among his people. "Show them," Vex commanded, and the chamber's walls came alive with holographic displays. The images showed a small spacecraft, clearly not of Vulcan design. Its hull was white and blue with strange markings in an unknown language. The craft moved through space with primitive but functional technology, far inferior to Vulcan ships but undeniably intelligent in its construction. "This vessel entered our territory 3 days ago near the Kepler system," Vex continued. "Our long-range sensors detected it investigating a pulsar. The craft's occupants appear to be biological entities using basic faster-than-light travel." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The implications hit every Vulcan present like a physical blow. If another species had achieved space travel, then their entire worldview was wrong. They were not alone. They were not special. They were not blessed. "This cannot be," declared High Priest Kex from his elevated platform. "The sacred texts speak clearly of our divine solitude. We are the chosen ones, destined to rule the empty galaxy until the stars themselves die." Scholar Vex found his voice. "Perhaps this is an opportunity. If another species has achieved intelligence, we could learn from them. Exchange knowledge. Share the galaxy in peace." The chamber fell silent. Such words bordered on blasphemy. Overlord Thex's eyes narrowed as he stared at the scholar. "Share?" Thex's voice dripped with disgust. "You speak of contamination, Vex. Our purity, our purpose, our very identity depends on our solitude. We are not meant to share the galaxy with inferior beings." Meanwhile, millions of light years away, the human research vessel Harmony drifted through space, its crew unaware they had just doomed their entire species. The ship was Earth's first attempt at deep space exploration, launched with hope and excitement to study distant phenomena and search for signs of other intelligent life. Kang Ho floated through the maintenance section, checking systems with practiced efficiency. He was a simple engineer, more comfortable with tools than with the grand dreams of exploration that had inspired this mission. His wife Lee Su worked in the science section, cataloging the incredible data they had gathered from the pulsar. Captain Park Jin called the crew together in the main conference room. His weathered face showed excitement as he addressed his team of 12 humans. "The pulsar readings are beyond anything we expected," Park Jin announced. "Lee Su's analysis suggests it might be artificially modified. We could be looking at evidence of an ancient civilization." Lee Su activated the holographic display, showing complex energy patterns emanating from the distant star. The pulse sequences contain mathematical relationships that don't occur naturally. Someone or something has been using this pulsar as a beacon. Kang Ho studied the data with growing wonder. For his entire life, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they might have found proof that other intelligent beings existed among the stars. "We should return to Earth immediately," urged Dr. Kim Tae, the mission's senior scientist. "This discovery will change everything. Humanity will know we're not alone." But they were wrong about one thing. They were not about to learn they weren't alone. They were about to learn something far more terrible. Back in the Vulcan Council chamber, the debate raged for hours. Some argued for study and caution. Others demanded immediate action. But Overlord Thex had already made his decision, and his voice cut through the arguments like a blade. "We have traced this vessel's origin," he announced. "It comes from a system containing a planet with billions of these creatures. They have developed space travel, planetary communication networks, and are expanding into their local star system." The chamber erupted in panic. Billions of intelligent beings? The nightmare was worse than anyone had imagined. "They must be eliminated," Thex declared. "All of them. Every last trace of their contamination must be cleansed from the galaxy before it spreads further." Scholar Vex stood up, his voice shaking with emotion. "We're talking about genocide. The complete destruction of an entire species." How can we not?" High Priest Kex interrupted. "Our sacred duty is to preserve the purity of the galaxy. These creatures threaten everything we are, everything we believe. They must be destroyed. The vote was swift and overwhelming. Only a handful of Velkans opposed the motion, their voices lost in the tide of fear and religious fervor that swept through the assembly. Overlord Thex smiled coldly as he received his authorization. I will personally lead the cleansing fleet. Within one planetary rotation, this contamination will be nothing but cosmic dust. As the council dispersed, Scholar Vex remained in the chamber, staring at the images of the human spacecraft. Something about the vessel's design suggested intelligence, creativity, even beauty. These beings had built something functional yet elegant, practical yet hopeful. In a few hours, they would all be dead. Aboard the Harmony, Kang Ho and Li Su shared a quiet meal in the observation deck, watching stars wheel slowly past the viewport. They talked about their plans after returning to Earth, about the children they hoped to have, about the bright future that awaited humanity as they took their first steps into the greater galaxy. They had no idea that their people's first contact with alien intelligence would also be their last. The Velkan war fleet was already assembling, preparing to teach the universe a terrible lesson about the price of disturbing those who believed themselves divinely alone among the stars.